Hello guys, welcome to another book recommendation, and today we're going to take a look at this book, the Book of Five Rings, and it was written by Miyamoto Musashi, who was a masterless samurai in feudal Japan in the 1600s, and he later became an independent teacher of swordsmanship. And you might ask yourself, why is that interesting today? Because there are some passages on mastery and also on strategy that are still applicable today to really any vocation if you want to become good at it, or any sport. So first, let's just hear what he has to say about himself in the introduction. I dueled more than 60 times, never once did I lose. That all took place between the time I was 13 years old and the time I was 29. So that means that he killed his first man when he was 13 in a duel, and he dueled 60 times to the death and survived all of them. And he retired from dueling at age 29 and settled into being an independent teacher, a masterless samurai. And he wrote this book at the age of 60, when he felt he had gained mastery and something to impart to the world. And here's his description of how to actually get to mastery in the first place, and what might hinder ever getting there. In the practice of every way of life and every kind of work, there is a state of mind called that of the deviant. Even if you strive diligently on your chosen path day after day, if your heart is not in accord with it, then even if you think you are on a good path from the point of view of the straight and true, this is not a genuine path. If you do not pursue a genuine path to its consummation, then a little bit of crookedness in the mind will later turn into a major warp. Reflect on this. And what he's saying here is that if you want to become a lawyer for money and your heart's not in it, you're not going to become a master lawyer. You might be very good, but that little part of you that is not completely in it, you're lacking the heart. That little crookedness will warp your mind eventually in a big way, so you will not actually make it to a master lawyer or any other vocation. So if you're pursuing swordsmanship and you really want to be a poet or something else, or your heart's not completely in swordsmanship, you can train every day diligently, you can do really well, and you can think you're on the right path, but you will never become a master swordsman. That's something to think about if mastery is the end goal. So a lot of the book is on sword fighting techniques and what weapons they used, the samurais, and I'll just read some of the passages that will give you a good sense of why they used two swords and how they used them. The point of talking about two swords is that it is the duty of all warriors, commanders and soldiers alike to wear two swords. In olden times they were called tachi and katana, or the great sword and the sword. Nowadays they are called katana and wakizashi, or the sword and the sidearm. So every samurai must carry one long sword and one short sword. For beginners in my school, the real thing is to practice the science wielding both swords, the long sword in one hand and the short sword in the other. So every beginner has to learn to dual wield as the first thing, so you can use the long sword with just one hand. That was new to me. I thought they would be starting out just using the long sword and master that and then move on to dual wielding, but instead they start dual wielding. And he gives the reason for that here. The trouble with wielding the long sword with both hands is that it is no good on horseback, no good when running hurriedly, no good on marshy ground, muddy fields, stony plains, steep roads or crowded places. So the space and time for fighting with both hands is very limited. When it is impossible to strike a killing blow using just one hand, then use two hands to do it. It should not require effort. The long sword is to be wielded in spacious places, the short sword in confined spaces. This is the basic idea of the way to begin with. It is better to wield two swords than one long sword when you are battling a mob all by yourself. So that's a little bit of a description of the actual sword fighting, and then he moves on to how you must observe your enemy. The eyes are to be focused in such a way as to maximize the range and breadth of vision. Observation and perception are two separate things. The observing eye is stronger, the perceiving eye is weaker. A specialty of martial arts is to see that which is far away closely and to see that which is nearby from a distance. In martial arts, it is important to be aware of opponent's swords and yet not look at the opponent's swords at all. This takes work. So what he's saying here is that you cannot narrow your focus at any time. You cannot focus on your opponent's hand or sword, because that will mean death. You have to keep the whole picture in your mind at all times so you can react to anything happening. Observe everything, do not focus or linger at a certain point. And here he has a passage on how you must keep your mind free at all times and not linger in specific places. First of all, when you take up the sword, in any case, the idea is to kill an opponent. Even though you may catch, hit or block an opponent's slashing sword or tie it up or obstruct it, all of these moves are opportunities for cutting the opponent down. This must be understood. If you think of catching, think of hitting, think of blocking, think of tying up, or think of obstructing, you will thereby become unable to make the kill. It is crucial to think of everything as an opportunity to kill. This should be given careful consideration. In large-scale military science, the arraying of troops is also a matter of positioning. Every instance thereof is an opportunity to win in war. Fixation is bad, this should be worked out thoroughly. So you must treat any situation as the opportunity to win. So if you view everything that happens with a free mind, you might find the opportunity to kill in everything. Even if you miss with a sword stroke or you're at a disadvantage, there may be something good in it that will give you the opportunity to kill, and you will not find it unless you have a free mind that is not narrowly focused or lingering on something that just happened. And to further illustrate this, he has something he calls striking down an opponent with a single beat. Among the rhythms used to strike an opponent, there is what is called a single beat, finding a position where you can reach the opponent, realizing when the opponent has not yet determined what to do. You strike directly, as fast as possible, without moving your body or fixing your attention. The stroke with which you strike an opponent before he has thought of whether to pull back, parry or strike is called the single beat. Once you have learned this rhythm well, you should practice striking the intervening stroke quickly. So this means that you will take advantage of indecision, or if your opponent lingers with his mind for a second or two contemplating something, you'll strike him down in that instant. You will not know what hit him. So you must be alert at all times. You can never linger, you can never relax, you can never do anything else than be completely alert and look for the opportunity to kill. So here's a passage on something I think is like dirty fighting in feudal Japan. Stabbing the face. When you are even with an opponent, it is essential to keep thinking of stabbing him in the face with the tip of your sword in the intervals between the opponent's sword blows and your own sword blows. When you have the intention of stabbing your opponent in the face, he will try to get both his hands and his body out of the way. When you can get your opponent to shrink away, there are various advantages of which you can avail yourself to win. You should work this out thoroughly. In the midst of battle, as soon as an opponent tries to get out of the way, you have already won. Therefore, it is imperative not to forget about the tactic of stabbing the face. This should be cultivated in the course of practicing martial arts. So what he means here is that if you already tried to stab him in the face, he will be on guard for that, and it'll alter what he does. He'll think about it consciously, and if he does that, he's already lost, because he will miss what else he'll do. And this brings to mind, when boxers illegally headbutt. Sometimes we let it slide when they not actually injure the other boxer, but it might have altered what the other boxer does in certain situations, and that'll be a disadvantage for him, even if he does not get the ruling out of technical knockout because of a cut or something like that, because it might alter his behavior and he might be thinking consciously about it. So I think this is like applying dirty tricks to winning, and obviously it's not okay in the boxer situation, but in feudal Japan, where you're trying to win and losing means death, you'll do anything you can to win, and this is one of the things that you can do, a little mind game. And here he has a comment on mastery and how to attain it. No matter how many opponents you beat, as long as you do anything in contravention of training, it cannot be the true path. So that first part of it, I think, is that if you do anything in training, you should do exactly the same when you're fighting, or if you're playing a game live, and the other way around. If you do anything when you're playing a live game that you did not do in training, or how you would do it in training, then it's wrong. Everything you do in training must be completely the same as you would do in a live battle, and the other way around. If you have not achieved that, you are not on the path to mastery. Anything that differs must be ironed out. If you can't do it in training, you obviously cannot do it live in a live match either, but it also works the other way around. If you do it in a live match different than what you would do in training, then you're also not on the true path to mastery. And he continues, this is something that requires thorough examination with 1,000 days of practice for training and 10,000 days of practice for refinement. So he is speaking to the same thing that you'll find in every modern book about mastery, that you need an incredible amount of time practicing the exact same thing to master it. The time investment in any mastery of anything is huge. And here has a riff on what we know in the modern saying that the attack is the best defense. Even though you are not to be always the one to attack, if it amounts to the same thing, you would rather take the initiative and put opponents on the defensive. So it's important to always keeping an eye on initiative, even if you are defending. And here's a passage on controlling the battle. Whenever opponents try to attack you, let them go ahead and do anything that is useless while preventing them from doing anything useful. This is essential to military science. And I think that this is a little bit like if you're playing a football game. It doesn't matter if the opponent is passing the ball in their own ranks far away from your goal because they're not dangerous. So let them do that. Don't expend energy trying to not make them do that or to hinder that. And when they make it upfield and they get closer and they start to be a threat, you'll expend energy to interrupt the plans. And he continues, here, if you consciously try to thwart opponents, you are already late. First, doing whatever you do scientifically, thwart the opponent's very first impulse to try something, thus foiling everything. To manipulate opponents in this way is mastery of the art of war, which comes from practice. So what he's saying here is that if you consciously have to think about what you're doing to prevent what the opponent is doing, you're already too late. You have to act immediately when the enemy gets the first impulse. And you can only do that if you're a master and you don't have to consciously think about your reaction, if it just happens fluidly, like in water, with a blank mind. If you have to think consciously about what you're going to do, you're already too late. And this can obviously only come from having been in the same situation thousands and thousands of times in practice. And here's a passage on crushing your enemy when he lets up just even a little bit. In individual martial arts, it also happens that an adversary will get out of rhythm in combat and start to fall apart. If you let such a chance get by you, the adversary will recover and thwart you. It is essential to follow up firmly on any loss of poise on the part of an opponent to prevent him from recovering. The follow-up calls for directness and power. It is a matter of lashing out violently in such a way that an opponent cannot recover. So that's about, when you finally get the advantage, you take it to the full extent. You do not let him recover. You make sure he's dead, which obviously is a little bit morbid in this dueling context, but I guess it also applies to many other areas of life that you might find, even if you're playing chess. If you have the opponent reeling, you really have to beat him. Don't let him recover. Press the initiative with relentless attacks, so he never has the time to recover. And here's a passage on becoming the opponent and looking from his perspective to understanding what you can do to win. Becoming the opponent means you should put yourself in an opponent's place and think from the opponent's point of view. As I see the world, if a burglar holds up in a house, he is considered a powerful opponent. From his point of view, however, the whole world is against him. He is holed up in a helpless situation. The one who is holed up is a pheasant. The one who is going in there to fight it out is a hawk. This calls for careful reflection. So even though you might think that the burglar in the house is going to be a fearsome adversary, he will see that the whole world is against him and he is indeed not fearsome and he will be scared. And there's something to be learned from that you might be able to take advantage of. So try to see the situation from your enemy and play into his fears and overconfidence. And here's something that we can call maybe a fake move. In large-scale military science, when you cannot discern the enemy's state, you pretend to make a powerful attack to see what they will do. Having seen opponents' methods, it is easy to seize victory by taking advantage of different tactics, specially adapted to each case. So if you make a fake assault with a sword, you might show how he's going to parry it, and you'll know that going forward, how he parries that situation, and you might use it to your advantage. Or if it's two armies fighting, and if you make a fake attack, you might see how they will respond to it. What will they do? How will they arrange the troops? What will it look like? Are they scared? Are they not scared? And you can use that to your advantage when you press the real attack and go for the victory. And here's an interesting passage that is a little bit in a similar vein, but this is more like faking a mood. There is infection in everything. Even sleepiness can be infectious, and yawning can be infectious. There is even the infection of time. In large-scale military science, when adversaries are excited and evidently are in a hurry to act, you behave as though you are completely unfazed, giving the appearance of being thoroughly relaxed and at ease. Do this, and adversaries themselves are influenced by this mood, becoming less enthusiastic. When you think opponents have caught that mood, you empty your own mind and act quickly and firmly, thus to gain the winning advantage. So in a sense, this is pretending to be sleepy, or unaware, or pretending to be in any kind of mood. And when the enemy sees that you look sleepy, he will also become sleepy. He will relax just maybe for a second or two, which is enough to be a disadvantage and will grant you the victory when you attack unexpectedly. Any mood is infectious, and even if you don't really are in that mood, you can infect the other opponent with that mood. So this is playing mind games. And here he has a little bit of a passage on how fright or fear can grant you the victory. Even in large-scale military science, threatening an adversary is not something right before the eyes. You may threaten by sound, you may threaten by making the small seem large, and you may threaten by making an unexpected move from the side. These are situations in which fright occurs. If you can seize the moment of fright, you can take advantage of it to gain victory. In individual martial arts also, you can threaten by means of your body, you can threaten by means of your sword, and you can threaten by means of your voice. What is essential is to suddenly make a move totally unexpected by the opponent, pick up on the advantage of fright, and seize victory right then and there. This must be worked out thoroughly. So what he's saying is that if you can frighten your opponent by doing something completely unexpected, he might just be a little bit slow to react than he would be if he had seen it before, and that will grant you victory. Also, fear will kill his concentration and his perfect balance in his mind. It'll put him off, even if it's just for a few seconds, before he regains his composure. And here he has a passage on trying the same thing more than once and why you should not do that. Mountain and sea means that it is bad to do the same thing over and over again. You may have to repeat something once, but it should not be done a third time. When you try something on an opponent, if it does not work the first time, you will not get any benefit out of rushing to do it again. Change your tactics abruptly, doing something completely different. If that still does not work, then try something else. Thus, the science of martial arts involves the presence of mind to act as the sea when the enemy is like a mountain, and act as a mountain when the enemy is like a sea. This requires careful reflection. So the modern definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And here he's saying don't waste your energy doing the same thing twice. So let's move on to a passage which is really about playing mind games, I think. You can knock the heart out of people with weapons, or with your body, or with your mind. It is not to be understood in just one way. When your enemies have completely lost heart, you do not have to pay attention to them anymore. Otherwise, you remain mindful. As long as adversaries still have ambitions, they will hardly collapse. And I remember here, I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger said that he would play these mind games right before a competition. In the warm-up room, you would like make little comments about the other competitors' muscles in specific areas, and it'll get them thinking about that consciously and erode their confidence, so they would already have lost before they entered the stage. He also had a story where he was training for the last Mr. Olympia, where nobody thought he would actually compete, but he was there as a commentator, but he was training intensely in Gold's gym, and there Mike Metzer and other of the competitors were also training, and he was not sure whether Arnold would compete or not. And Arnold would just, for no reason at all, smile at him intently with eye contact across the gym many times during the training sessions of those days. And it would completely throw off Mike Mentzer. He would not know what the fuck was off. And I was playing a mind game with him, derailing his concentration and effort in the training. And making him wonder what would happen if Arnold really did compete, which he eventually did, and he also won. And here's a passage on having a defense without being defensive and constantly looking for the initiative. In the course of struggle for victory by military science, the thing is to concentrate on seizing the initiative and getting the jump on others in everything. The sense of a guard or defensive posture is that of awaiting the initiative. This should be worked out thoroughly. In the course of struggle for victory by military science, you win by disrupting others' defenses, by making moves opponents do not expect, by confusing opponents or irritating them or scaring them, sensing the pattern of the rhythm when opponents get mixed up to seize victory. Thus, there is an aversion to the defensive attitude involved in concern with guard positions. Therefore, in my science, there is what is called having a guard without a guard, meaning that one has a defense without being defensive. So yeah, a defense without being defensive, meaning that you're all of the time, while you're being defensive, looking to take the initiative and assault. There is a totally different feeling in being attacked by others first than in attacking others yourself. So always attack first if it's a possibility, all other things being equal. And that's pretty much it for the Book of Five Rings, and there's much more in it that you can read yourself if you pick up the book. But in the edition that I have, there's also a second book, and this one is written by Yagyu Munenori in the same time as the Book of the Five Rings, but this book is called The Book of Family Traditions on the Art of War. And the Japanese Yagyu Munenori, who wrote it, was also a samurai, but he was higher up in the hierarchy of things. He was not a masterless samurai. He was the teacher of the shogun when he was a kid, and he also became the spy master of the shogun. And there's also some interesting passages in this book, and I'll select some of them to read. The first one is on mastery. To learn all the sword strokes, the physical postures, and the focus of the eyes, to thoroughly learn all there is to learn and practice it, is the spirit of consummating knowledge. Then, when you have succeeded in learning, when everything you have learned disappears from your conscious mind and you become innocent, this is the spirit of perfecting things. So here he is describing mastery, and mastery is when you've practiced something for so long that you can do it without thinking consciously about it at all. You're on the path to mastery. In the beginning you think about how to perform a certain swing, and when you've done it enough times, you forget about the swing itself. You don't hold it consciously in your mind, and you just do the swing. It's just automatic, and that's when you're on the right path. And here's a passage I really like on setting traps by the spy master. Appearance and intention are fundamental to the art of war. Appearance and intention mean the strategic use of ploys, the use of falsehood to gain what is real. Appearance and intention inevitably ensnare people when artfully used, even if people sense that there is an ulterior intention behind the overt appearance. When you set up your ploys and opponents fall for them, then you win by letting them act on your ruse. As for those who do not fall for a ploy, when you see they will not fall into one trap, you have another one set. Then even if opponents have not fallen for your original ploy, in effect they actually have. And I think that's pretty powerful, that if you're going to set a trap, don't just set one, set many traps. Just litter the place with traps. Because if he does not fall into the first one and acts accordingly to avoid it, he will fall into the next one. So to try and translate into modern meaning, maybe if you were trying to make a hostile takeover of a company, you're buying up stock, but you're also trying to do many other things to take over the company at the same time, and maybe you're also looking at buying a competitor instead and taking that over while everybody is watching you trying to take over the first company. So many traps, that makes it very hard to avoid all of them. And here's another passage on distracting your opponent. To do something unexpected as a ploy to startle an opponent is also an appearance concealing an ulterior intention, an art of war. When an opponent is startled and the feeling of opposition is distracted, the opponent will experience a gap in reaction time. Even simple, ordinary gestures like raising your hand are used to distract an opponent's attention. So here it's doing something that is unexpected as a distraction that'll make him pause just for a second or relax his guard just a little bit. Like being friendly when you're supposed to be angry, or raising your hand in a weird way, or whatever it is, just unexpected, and will make him focus and linger his mind for a little bit on that giving you the advantage, and you will win. It doesn't take much in sword fighting, I guess. Just one mistake and you're dead. And that mistake can be focusing on something or having your mind lingering a little bit on what you just did or what your opponent did, and then you are dead. So here's a passage on having a margin of safety when you're sword fighting. It is easy to kill someone with a slash of a sword. It is hard to be impossible for others to cut down. Even if someone lashes out at you with the intention of cutting you down, carefully note the margin of safety where you are out of reach and calmly let yourself be hit at by the enemy. Even if an adversary lashes out thinking he will score a blow, as long as there is that margin, he will not manage to strike you. A stroke of the sword that does not hit its target is the sword stroke of death. You reach over it to strike the winning blow, your adversary's initiative having missed its mark. You turn the tables around and get the jump on your adversary. And this is about winning in a very simple way, that you have the knowledge of how far he can reach to hit you. And he doesn't, so he misses his mark, and that makes him open for you to just kill him. And I think probably the margin of safety is something that would be applicable to other situations as well. If you know it, you don't have to worry. And the enemy will expend himself because he doesn't know what your margin of safety is, and he will make mistakes. And I have one closing remark here from the book, and this is about not thinking that you have won too early or you might lose. When you strike a blow, do not keep your mind on where you hit. After striking, bring your mind back to observe your adversary's condition. Once he is struck, an opponent's mood changes. When one gets hit, one becomes resentful and angry. When angered, an adversary becomes vehement. If you are inattentive, you will get hit. Think of an adversary who has been hit as a raging wild boar. When you are conscious of having struck a blow, you let your mind tarry and are thus inattentive. You should be aware that an opponent's energy will emerge when he is hit. So even if you hit him and think you have won, he might still just take you out because now he's really angry and he has lots of energy and he'll try one last angry stroke at you. So even if you win, you might still lose in that instant if you're not careful. You have to keep your attention focused at all times, even when you think you have won, until victory is certain. And that's it, guys. That's the book. The Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi. And it's an interesting read, and it's not very long. It's a very short and very small book. Probably take maybe 3 hours to read the book. And there's a lot of good stuff in here about mastery and strategy in general that you might find useful for other occupations than dueling with swords. So pick up the book if you think it looks interesting, and tell me in the comments if you already read the book, what you think of it, or anything else you would like to talk about. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.